Welcome to Huntington Beach State Park. I'm Ranger Mike, and we've got Ranger Carly behind the camera. And today we're going to be talking about shorebirds. If you've ever been to Huntington Beach State Park, we're located in Murrells Inlet, South Carolina. And one of the things that the park is most well known for is the vast number of birds here. More species of birds have been seen in this state park than anywhere else in South Carolina. One of the reasons for that is we have an incredible diversity of habitats in a relatively compact area. We've got freshwater marshes, salt marshes, brackish marshes, maritime forests, sand dunes, a rocky shore. Well, actually it's a jetty built by the Army Corps of Engineers back in 1979 and 1980. But for all intents and purposes, for a lot of the birds that visit the park, it might as well be a rocky coastline where one would not normally exist. Also, because of the jetty being constructed by the Corps of Engineers to keep the actual inlet of Murrells Inlet open and functioning for boat traffic, periodically the Corps of Engineers has to do a maintenance dredge where they actually clean out the sand and mud that is built up in the boating channel. And one of the ways that helps shorebirds is some of that sand is very silty, can't be used for beach nourishment, can't be pumped on the beach. So they pump it here to the base of the jetty. That helps shore up the jetty, make sure that it continues functioning and doing its job. But it also provides an awesome nesting area for a lot of our shorebirds. Right now we're kind of at the beginning of the shorebird nesting season, so we're just starting to get a couple of birds in that are nesting. However, the areas, the mud flats over to this side here, and then of course the beach on the other side of this fenced-in area are great feeding habitats for shorebirds year-round, and there are quite a few of them taking advantage of that right now. So you may be wondering, why do we have to take these efforts for the shorebirds? Well, shorebirds are one of the most rapidly declining groups of animals in the world. If you have visited or live along the coast, you're probably very familiar with the problems facing another threatened species, our loggerhead sea turtles that nest here on the beach. They have bumper stickers and TV commercials, and most everybody knows to keep your lights off the beach in the summertime to help protect those animals. Unfortunately, a lot of the shorebird species are in even more trouble, and not near as many people know about their plights. So what are some of these issues facing shorebirds? Well, one, when it comes to nesting, these animals are adapted for nesting right on the ground. They nest right on the beach, just above the spring tide line. That's normally the highest reach of the monthly tides. They don't build really nests. They're more like scrapes in the ground. Because if you think about it, if you're nesting on the ground and you build an elaborate nest around your eggs or your chicks, you have actually put a bullseye target around your children. So that would leave them extremely vulnerable to predators. So it's just a little scrape in the sand. The eggs that they lay are very well camouflaged to blend in with the sand and be unrecognizable. So it's very important when you visit the beach, and hopefully that'll be soon. We're able to get out to our beaches again. It is important to stay out of the roped and signed off areas that are designed to give these birds a little bit of protection. Another issue when it comes to both nesting and migrating shorebirds are dogs, especially dogs off leashes. And I'm sure you have the nicest dog in the world that would never chase a shorebird. But the thing of it is, these birds don't realize that. So if they see a dog off a leash, they're seeing a predator. They're seeing a fox or coyote that's going to eat them or eat their eggs or eat their chicks. So it's very important to keep your dogs out of areas that are set aside for the birds nesting. Here at Huntington Beach State Park, the northern end of the park, from the North Beach access up to the jetty, is a dog-free zone year-round, just to give these animals a little bit of help. Another issue that comes up with the dogs and the birds, and it's not just nesting when they're vulnerable. Some of these shorebirds have the longest migrations of any animals on Earth. They're basically migrating from one end of the planet to the other in the course of a migrating season. One of the things that is critical, that is literally the difference between life and death for these birds, is having a safe beach where they can rest and feed undisturbed, not chased by people or dogs. And so that's something that really the future of some of these species depends on. Now, as I was saying, we are just starting to get a couple of birds nesting in our shorebird nesting area. So I'm going to ask Carly to kind of pan over, and let's see if we have a brand new oyster catcher nest. This was not here just 2 days ago, and oyster catchers are one of our larger shorebirds in South Carolina. They're also very attractive. They have a stark black head and a bright red bill. And that bill is flattened like an oyster knife, because that's exactly what it is. The oyster catchers use that bill to feed on oysters and other bivalves like mussels and clams, make up most of their diet. Unlike a lot of the shorebirds that'll migrate far away outside of the nesting season, oyster catchers, many oyster catchers actually will spend the winter with us here in South Carolina, including oyster catchers that live further north than us. Now, some of the things that we have done out here to help protect these birds is, one, we've got the dredge spoil, the sand that's been pumped in by the Corps engineers. We have the signage that you can see over here, and very clearly roped off. And these are a couple of our other bird species that we're trying to protect here. The Wilson's plover, which is a state threatened species in South Carolina. And we have a couple of them that are nesting in here right now. And a little later on, we will have least terns. Now, least terns are not technically shorebirds, they're seabirds. And seabirds and shorebirds grouped together are considered beach nesting birds, because they do use the same beach habitat. Now, one of the biggest differences between the shorebirds and their caring for chicks and the seabirds and how they care for chicks, the biggest difference is, for example, with the Wilson's plovers, and this is also true for the oyster catchers, once they hatch out their chicks, the chicks are only going to be at that nest for hours. The chicks are fairly self-sufficient. They can get up and they can walk around on their own very shortly after hatching. Now, it will take them about probably 3 weeks before they're able to fly on their own. So after the last egg is hatched, just a few hours after that last egg is hatched, the parents are going to lead them out of the fenced off nesting area down here to the mud flats, or maybe to the beach on the other side, and they will begin showing the chicks how to find food. But they are never actually catching food and putting it in the chick's mouth. They have to do that on their own. So that does mean that wherever you're going to have Wilson's plovers nesting, you have to have a fence that the parents can walk through easily, because they're going to have to walk the chicks back out of it shortly after they hatch. This is also the case for our oyster catchers up here. Now, the least terns, who have just migrated back to South Carolina, in fact, we saw our first ones here at the park not even a full week ago, last Tuesday. The least terns are colonial nesters, and their chicks are altricial. They're not precocial like the shorebirds that can fend for themselves. Their chicks, we can hear some willets off in the background there. Another shorebird that nests here. So with the least tern chicks, their young are going to require a lot of care. So they nest in big colonies, and there's safety in numbers. So if a predator threatens the colony, these little birds, which I have a model of right over here, so you can get an idea of the size of them. This is a model of a least tern. So they are the smallest of our tern species. However, the parents are very good at trying to fend off predators. They will dive right at the end of the nose of a predator, fly up at the last second, sometimes drop a hot little bomb on the predator, pooping on them, trying to drive them away, trying to discourage them. The least tern chicks are especially vulnerable because they're going to be here for a few weeks. They're totally dependent on the parents to bring them food, bring them cooling water. The parents will dive over a body of water, wetting their breast feathers, and then come back to cool the chicks with that. These chicks, because they're out here on the nesting ground so long, they're also vulnerable to avian predators, hawks, crows, gulls, things like that. And because they nest later than our other birds, they sometimes don't start nesting until the middle of May. It's going to be very, very hot out here. You may have had the experience trying to walk barefoot to the beach on a hot summer day and burnt your feet. Well, imagine you're a little tiny chick having to live in that. So one of the things that we have done this year using 8th grade students throughout much of coastal South Carolina is we have constructed least tern shelters. These little wooden tents that you see out here are all designed to give the chicks a place to shelter from the sun so they don't overheat, and also to shelter from potential predators. Now, another thing that we do to, once again, to help protect these birds, the fence that we have here is actually a very special type of fence. This is a solar-powered electric fence. So we're about 1.2 miles from the nearest facilities in the park. So we actually use a solar panel that charges batteries throughout the day, and that actually powers this electric fence. Now, that's the second fence. It's behind this row of rope and strings. Now, the electric fence only gives out a very small shock. Basically, it's designed to shock the noses of, say, mammalian predators. Like if a coyote or a raccoon or a mink comes here, sniffs the fence, it'll get a short, sharp shock. So it'll know where the invisible nose-biting monster lives and knows to stay away from this area. And that will help provide protection for a lot of the birds that are nesting here. The electric fence is a great piece of technology. We've used them off and on over the years. We lost our original setup in the Nature Center fire almost 4 years ago. So for a couple of years we didn't have one, and without the electric fence we did not produce a single least tern chick. And then last year we produced well over 40. We also had, throughout the entire park, we had 19 Wilson's plover chicks and two oyster catcher chicks. So the first oyster catcher nest was actually inside the electric fence and was successful. The second pair nested outside the fence, and unfortunately we lost those eggs to a coyote after a couple weeks. So at this point I want to see if anybody out there on Facebook has any questions they would like to ask. And if not, we can walk down to the end of the fence here, and let's take a look at some of the other shorebirds that are actually feeding out here. One thing I forgot to mention earlier, one of those federally threatened shorebird species, the red knots. Now, they don't nest here in South Carolina, but they have the longest migration of any of them. And one of the things that make their vast migrations possible, in addition to having safe beaches to feed and rest undisturbed, but they time their migrations to coincide with the nesting of this animal, the horseshoe crab. Now, these horseshoe crabs, despite the name, aren't really crabs. They're more closely related to spiders and scorpions, but they are completely harmless. And they nest on beaches from South Carolina up along the eastern seaboard. They nest much like sea turtles. They actually come up out of the water or just above the high tide line to lay their eggs. And because of that, sometimes the females, who are the larger of them, will get left behind on the beaches. It is very exhausting, and not only does she have to crawl up the beach, dig a nest, lay the eggs, but she has to carry one or more males that have attached to her shell. So sometimes in the summer months, you'll see them, the females, exhausted, left behind on the beach. The kind thing to do is to pick them up by the edge of the shell and carry them back to the water. never pick them up from the Telson. This is not a weapon, it's not a stinger, it's just a lever that they can use to turn themselves back over if they get flipped upside down. But they have to have it to survive, and it will break off if you try to pick them up from it, so don't do that. Even though they have little pinchers in there, they can't pinch hard enough to hurt you. So if you ever see them stranded on the beach and they're live, give them a little lift down to the water's edge. That'll help them out. That'll help the shorebirds out as well.
I did have one question come up, Mike.
Okay.
They asked, are the spots marked clearly where we can't walk?
Yes.
Great.
Yeah, so this is what you would normally see. You would see the signs, and here in the park, most of the areas are roped off or have string. So yeah, we do try to make that very clear. And as I was saying earlier, the north end of the parks, the northern beach access, we don't allow any dogs on that beach at all any time of the year, just to try to give these birds a little bit more protection. There's a plover that actually, a plover landed right behind Carly and then immediately took off again. All right. There's a lot of birds up here resting, so let's just go take a. If you would like, we can walk around. Oh, here's a nice view of a male Wilson's plover just coming out of the nesting area, and his mate is actually sitting on eggs right now. And you can tell the male and the female part, that band there, see how it's really black and crisp, real dark and crisp on the male, not so much on the female. They have a little bit of a thicker bill than some of the other plovers. They are specialists in feeding on small crabs. They love fiddler crabs from the salt marsh. I've also frequently seen them eat small little ghost crabs from the beach. I'll walk around the edge here and see what else we can see.
Another question, Mike, that came up was if we have any sea turtle nests yet.
We do not have any sea turtle nests yet. Sea turtle season starts May 1st for South Carolina. It got off to a very early start last summer, but for us, since we're kind of near the northern end of the coast, we don't normally get our first sea turtle nest until a week or two into May. So still a little early for that. Wilson's plover pair just a moment ago, and the female is up here. I'm not sure if you can see that at home though. Try to get a little closer. Another thing that's very helpful with us is we actually work a lot with Audubon, both our local Audubon Club, Waccamaw Audubon, and Audubon South Carolina. They have been wonderful friends to the park. Last summer, we used the Shorebirds Stewards program with Audubon South Carolina for great effect. This area down here, actually the whole shorebird nesting area kind of curves around into a point, and it is a very popular place for boaters. So one of the issues that we have here is people bringing in boats, dogs in on boats into the park and turning them loose. And that would actually have devastating consequences on the birds trying to nest here. So on weekends and holidays, I work with the volunteers from the Shorebirds Stewards program, and basically we act as bodyguards, trying to help protect the birds. That's especially important during that vulnerable period when both the least terns and the Wilson's plovers or oyster catchers are trying to get their chicks down to the water for the first time. That can be a critical time, and without their help, the shorebirds would not be near as successful. Now, I'm not sure if you can hear it on Facebook, but that squeaky noise that sounds almost like an insect, that's actually the Wilson's plover. Yeah, we can see our Wilson's plovers. That's one of the nests there. That's the female sitting on the nest in that little cluster of plants there. Generally, because they're nesting right on the ground, in the case of the Wilson's plovers, they usually will build their nest next to a piece of driftwood or a couple little plants to help camouflage where the nest is. And we can get a little bit closer. Like I said, I don't want her to flush. She seems to be getting maybe a little used to her. Her nest is pretty close to the edge of the electric fence, and the electric fence does require to be checked pretty much daily to make sure it's still functioning. Now you may be wondering, like, she's nesting in a little tiny cluster of plants. Why doesn't she nest in this big thicket of sea oats over here? Well, one of the advantages for both shorebirds and seabirds for nesting on big like sandbars like this, a little bit of vegetation is fine, but they do not like a ton of vegetation, because the more plant life there is, the greater the likelihood those plants can hide predators that can sneak up on them. So they want to be able to see things coming. I described earlier how the least terns will dive bomb and attack potential predators. The Wilson's plovers, and other species of plovers for that matter, actually will try to lead predators away from the nest. They'll drop a wing down, pretending like the wing is broken. Sometimes with the Wilson's plovers, I notice they'll drop both wings down and flutter them, and will actually try to draw the predator away from the nest as best as possible. Alrighty, folks, wanted to see if anybody had any last minute questions before we wrap things up.
We do have one here. They asked how long from when they lay eggs till the eggs hatch.
Okay, it can vary on the species, but it'll be several weeks, 4 or 5 weeks.
Great.
And then in the case like the plovers, it's going to be an additional 3 weeks to get them before they're fledged and can fly on their own. It will be longer for that with the least terns. All right, folks. Well, thank you all so much for joining us for our Facebook Live today here at Huntington Beach State Park in Murrells Inlet. This is Ranger Mike, and for Ranger Carly, we are signing off, and we look forward to the time when the parks will be back open and you can come back and visit us again. We do miss y'all. Goodbye.